Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. The latch clicked while my shirt was halfway up, my chest went cold. I yanked the fabric down and spun fast. Quinn froze in the doorway with his hand on the knob. My name is Mara and I'm 24. Time stretched thin while we stared. The hall behind him felt like a trap. Out, I pointed at the hall and kept my feet planted. He shuffled back without a word. The door shut, but the lock felt loose in my hand. I held it until my fingers tingled. Something had already crossed the line. I dressed quick and listened, no water running, no clatter. His steps faded toward the kitchen, slow and careful. I opened the door a crack and watched the hinge settle. There was a thin wedge near the jamb, barely visible. That wedge shouldn't be there, right? I picked it up with 2 fingers and slipped it into my pocket. My heart gave 2 hard knocks like a warning. He knew this door better than I did. I wiped my palms on my jeans and stepped out. The hallway felt quiet in a bad way. Quinn poured cereal like nothing had happened. He kept his eyes on the bowl, jaw tight and busy. Bathroom lock sticks again, he offered, voice flat. It worked yesterday, I answered, voice flatter. He shrugged without looking up, which told me plenty. I tested my room key right there. The bolt slid halfway and caught on nothing. I tried again and it slipped with a soft hitch. He stirred his spoon slower, listening without turning. My neck prickled like I'd missed a detail. You start counting then, you can't help it. How many nights did I hear floorboards at midnight? How many times did I blame wind and pipes? Memory became a slideshow I didn't ask for. Patterns showed up where I wanted none. I set my phone on the counter with the screen dark. Did you knock earlier? I asked, casual on purpose. He lifted one shoulder and reached for the sink. Water hissed, a shield against questions. He set the bowl down with too much care. I watched his eyes flick to my door, quick and guilty. There it was, the tiny slip you wait for. I didn't press because pressure makes lies multiply. I pocketed my key and walked back slowly. He watched the floor like it might answer. I closed myself in and checked the frame again. The strike plate had fresh scuffs, thin lines and small bites. Someone had tested angles until one worked. I breathed in for 4 and let it all out. Fear sharpened into a plan I could follow. Phone on dresser, camera ready, screen off, simple and quiet. Door open 1 inch, just enough for curiosity. I sat on the floor beside the nightstand and waited. The boards told me every step in this old place. Every step would tell me more soon. I kept still until my legs ached and the room hummed. The hall creaked once, then silence, then a careful shift. That careful shift mattered more than any excuse. I counted 10 and felt my pulse knock again. A hinge breathed like someone testing distance. I didn't move because movement spooks a hunter. The gap stayed black, then there was a glint. Metal catches light even when you hide it well. My breath stalled on the way out. I waited for the next sound, just one more proof. This is how I know I wasn't imagining it. Not a draft, not a random house noise. A thumb brushed the door like a nervous tick. The gap widened a finger's width and held. I gripped the dresser edge and leaned forward. I almost spoke, but I swallowed it down. Timing mattered. I wanted his choice on record, not my accusation. You learn fast that truth hates interruptions. I let the moment stretch until it trembled. Then I reached for the knob and tightened my hand. I yanked the knob and pulled hard. Someone pitched forward into my space. Quinn caught himself on the frame with a sharp grunt. A phone hung halfway between us like a guilty animal. My pulse climbed, but my voice came out steady. Hand it over. I held out my palm and didn't blink. He tucked the device behind his back, coward move and obvious. I stepped in and closed the distance, one shoe at a time. Now I didn't raise volume because calm bites deeper. He shifted his weight and glanced down the hall. That glance gave me every answer I needed. I slid past him and locked the entrance with a firm twist. No running, I said it like a rule already written. He stood stiff with his shoulders high and twitchy. I lifted my other hand for the second demand. Empty your pockets or we call someone. He tried a weak laugh and looked at the floor. I opened my dresser drawer and set my own phone. Record already rolling from earlier, clean and clear. Do it, I tapped the wood once and waited. He breathed through his nose and started unloading. Keys, wallet, a thin metal shim that didn't belong here. I pointed at the strip and then at the latch. He swallowed and shrugged without meeting my eyes. The lie arrived slow and clumsy on purpose. Found it outside, his mouth twitched like a bad reflex. I opened the camera app and showed black screen recording. Try again, my thumb hovered near call, not bluffing. He lifted the phone he had hidden and offered it halfway. I didn't reach yet because leverage matters until proof. Unlock it, his hand shook while he tapped. The gallery opened on a blank grid, too clean to trust. I hid back and looked for trash while he watched. An album sat with a generic name and nothing inside. That nothing felt constructed, not empty. Where are the drafts? I kept my tone flat to pressure him. His mouth worked but sound didn't come. He turned the brightness down like shade could save him. I raised my device and took a still of the screen. 3 choices, I counted on my fingers slowly. Call the office, call the police, or tell me everything. Not police, his shoulders dropped a fraction. He held the phone out fully now, both hands open. I took it and scrolled notifications with deliberate pauses. A cloud backup badge flashed, then disappeared fast. He winced like a door slammed inside his head. I reached for the router and unplugged a single cable. He jerked forward, then stopped when I stared him down. Sit, I pointed to the chair and he obeyed quick. I turned airplane mode on both devices. No more uploads tonight if there were any at all. Why, it landed softer than I expected, but honest. He rubbed his forearm and picked at a nail. I heard you test the lock last week, his gaze drifted. You looked scared, he swallowed and closed his eyes. I wanted to see if you were safe. I let the silence stand and watched him sweat. The excuse tried to rewire what I knew. I pictured the sliver opening and the hovering phone. Curiosity didn't hold a camera like that. Keep going, my voice sounded colder than I felt. He told me about a podcast on self-defense. He told me about suspicious noises after midnight. He avoided every word that mattered. My chest tightened with a different kind of anger. You watched me change, I didn't give him an exit. His breath hitched and his jaw clenched hard. No recording, the words fell out like a bargain chip. Then there's nothing to keep you here, I stood straighter. We take this to management in the morning. He stared at the floor tiles like they might open. I opened files and found a sync cache with timestamps. 3 were from last night and 1 from earlier. I tapped the newest and the thumbnail tried to load. Buffering spun because I had killed the signal. Evidence existed somewhere that wasn't in this room. I looked at him and saw panic turn into planning. He thought he could wipe it if I slipped. I moved to the window and slid the device behind the screen. Try to grab it and you leave with cuffs. His lips parted then pressed shut like a bolt. I took photos of his pile on the dresser. The shim, the keys, the wallet opened to an ID. Pick up the strip, he reached and held it out. Show me how it works on the lock. He faltered and then angled it with practiced hands. The latch gave with a tiny tick that burned my ears. He flinched when he realized he had shown me everything. I filmed the action from 6 inches away. Thank you, the words tasted like iron and control. His shoulders sagged because the mask had slipped. Here's what happens, I kept my voice measured and slow. You write a statement for the building in the morning. You refuse and I send all of this right now. He nodded once and stared at his shoes. I knew nods could turn into sabotage if I blinked. I opened my notes app and drafted bullet points with times. I read each line out loud and watched him swallow. He tried to cut in, but I lifted a finger. You will get a speak after this is saved. I uploaded to a private drive once the network returned. A text vibrated on his screen with a preview he didn't want. Cloud Sync confirmed 1 video stored on his account. I captured that alert with mine because memory fails. Password, I leaned in until he looked up. He gave it with a small voice that barely held. I logged in and paused the auto backup completely. Then I located the clip and moved it to a secure folder. Chain of custody matters when people start lying. I shared it to my email with a unique subject line. The send went through and the knot in my chest loosened. He whispered sorry and reached for the shim again. I placed my hand over it and shook my head once. This stays with me. I slid it into a sealed bag. This stays separate from your things until tomorrow. He blinked hard and nodded because he had no leverage. I opened the entry and pointed to the hallway. You sleep on the couch tonight and keep away from my door. You breathe near this threshold and we escalate. He stepped back slowly with his hands visible. I shut the lock and set a chair under the handle for insurance. I stood there with both phones and pressed my forehead to wood. Not relief, not victory, something colder and cleaner. I had bent the night back into my control. Tomorrow would break something permanent either way. I pulled the shades tight and kept my shoes on until dawn. The handle twitched at first light, one soft scrape, then pressure. I slid the chair aside and planted my feet. Back up, my voice carried through the door and hit bone. Silence stretched, then a retreating shuffle down the hall. He was testing boundaries before coffee, of course he was. I opened fast and stepped into the passage. Quinn stood near the thermostat with empty hands. Maintenance wants us downstairs at 8, he checked the time. We go together, I answered, already moving. He followed like a shadow that learned manners overnight. In the kitchen, he reached for the counter, then froze. Bathroom first, he tried casual that didn't land. Leave your phone here, I tapped the table twice. He set it down with 2 fingers and backed away. Control lived in small rules and I kept making them. I turned on my device and filmed him crossing the living room. No sound from the couch, no mess, no excuse. The night had been long and disciplined on both sides. He glanced at his phone like it might save him. I pocketed both and laced my boots tighter. We hit the lobby with the clock just shy of 8. The property manager waited near the desk with a clipboard. Conference room, her eyes flicked from me to Quinn. He cleared his throat and stuffed his hands in pockets. I held mine flat on the table so I wouldn't shake. Walk me through last night, she clicked a pen once. I placed the sealed bag on the table without ceremony. Then I slid a printed timeline across the wood. Quinn sat stiff and stared at the corner of the floor. I opened the first clip and angled the screen toward her. She watched the lock give under the metal strip. Her jaw tightened by a fraction that only truth causes. Is there anything stored off device? She looked at me. Yes, I gave her the folder name and timestamp. Quinn's shoulders rose, then dropped when she wrote it down. Building has hallway cameras along this wing, she added evenly. I want last night between 11 and 2 pulled now. The front desk attendant nodded and left at a jog. Quinn rubbed his temple like a headache had finally arrived. My spine straightened because outside validation changes everything. He tried a pivot I didn't expect, an apology built from fragments. I messed up, I panicked, I'll pay for new locks. I lifted a hand and he quieted mid-sentence. Ownership is not negotiation, each word landed like a step. The manager noted that line and underlined something twice. The attendant returned with a tablet and a tight mouth. We watched a timeline stutter forward in small increments. There he was near our door at 2:11 exactly. Head tilted, phone raised, a slow lean into the frame. Quinn's breath hitched and the room went colder. Stop, the manager tapped the screen and zoomed. No ambiguity, no missing pixels, just intent. Given this, we issue a notice and change your access. Her tone never rose, which made it heavier. Quinn stared at the table like it might swallow him. I can leave today, he muttered, voice thin and rasped. You can gather essentials under supervision, she corrected. Everything else waits for a scheduled pickup with staff. He flinched but nodded, trapped by policy he couldn't charm. I unclenched my fists one finger at a time. The manager turned to me with an even gaze. Do you want a police report on record today? Yes, I didn't hesitate because hesitation drifts into doubt. She handed me a printed form and a direct number. Quinn exhaled, then started breathing shallow like a runner. We walked upstairs with a maintenance tech and a master key. The tech replaced the latch in minutes with quiet efficiency. He installed a reinforced plate while I filmed each step. Chain of custody again, habit now, not fear. Quinn watched the floor molding and kept his mouth shut. Grab your bag, the manager gestured, standing by the doorway. Quinn moved to his room and paused at his desk. No electronics from that drawer, I cut in. He blinked twice and kept moving to the closet. The manager nodded at me once, good catch, and noted. He zipped a duffel and set it down hard. Wallet, keys, backup codes, I held out my palm. He produced a crumpled envelope that didn't look recent. I photographed each item and placed them in a marked pouch. The tech finished and tested the new lock with a solid click. We stepped into the hall and closed my door behind us. Quinn's new fob beeped negative at the reader, access revoked. He flinched like the sound pinched skin. Escort him to the office for the notice, the manager said. I stayed outside my door and listened until the elevator swallowed them. I went back in and sat at the table, breathing slow. It wasn't over, it was held together. Control feels like a thin cord until you pull it tight. I opened my email and confirmed the file sat safe. Then another notification arrived that I didn't expect. Account recovery requested on your drive, the alert read. Someone was already testing my defenses from a different angle. I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to the manager. Then I enabled additional verification with a fresh passcode. I felt my hands steady as the pieces locked again. A minute later, a knock, too short, one long police pattern. I opened and let the officer into the living room. Body camera on, notebook ready, direct and quiet. Tell me what happened, he began, eyes on my hands. I pointed to the evidence bag and the video on loop. He watched without commentary and then faced me square. You want to pursue charges, he asked, neutral and calm. Yes, and I want a no-contact order. He nodded and wrote details with slow care. Expect a call this afternoon, he said, already turning. As he left, my phone vibrated with a new message. Unknown number, a single line begging for mercy. Please don't ruin my life, the plea sat there. I stared at it until my jaw ached from clenching. Then I archived it and added the number to the report. I stood by the new lock and pressed my forehead gently. Not to rest, to mark the place that failed and learned. The next hours would be paperwork and logistics. Still, the real work had already shifted inside me. I wasn't waiting anymore, I was driving what happened next. An alert popped on my screen, unknown device joined our network. I killed the Wi-Fi and stood very still. No one else had access at that hour. Something had slipped past my precautions anyway. I grabbed my notebook and started a new list. I called the front desk and asked for the tech. Signal spiked near your unit, the attendant confirmed, voice tight. Stay inside, we're on our way, short, clipped, efficient. I checked the peephole and kept the chain set. I counted my breaths until boots hit the hallway. 2 staff arrived with a small scanner and calm faces. Walk us through your layout, one requested, pen ready. We moved room to room while the device chirped. The tone climbed near the ceiling, not the door. I felt anger sharpen, not fear. The scanner screamed under the smoke detector, too loud to ignore. Permission to open, the tech asked, waiting for my nod. He twisted the plate and eased it down. A tiny lens glared back like a broken promise. No more guessing, surveillance, deliberate and placed. Do not touch it, I warned, voice steady now. I filmed every angle while the tech pointed. He bagged the unit and labeled with time. Chain of custody again, automatic and careful. My stomach flipped but my hands stayed stable. Who had a ladder, I asked, eyes on the frame. We keep one in the utility closet, the attendant answered. Log shows a checkout at noon yesterday. Name on the slip, I pushed, heart pounding hard. She read it and went very quiet. Quinn's name sat there in clean handwriting. No wriggle room left, no helpful ambiguity. The tech photographed the closet tag for records. Maintenance is secure now, he added, embarrassed but firm. Policy would change by sunset if I had my way. My phone buzzed with the detective's number. Update us, he requested, brisk and focused. I described the find in the checkout log. Hold position, we're en route with a warrant. I locked eyes with the attendant until she nodded. While we waited, a fist hit the door twice. Open up, a male voice insisted, trying for friendly. I didn't move, the staff didn't either. Notice service, the voice added, paperwork tapping wood. I set my camera on the chain gap and recorded. Through the crack, a man in a blazer held forms. Temporary order, he announced, careful to face the lens. From your building against Mr. Quinn, effective immediately. He slid the documents through the slot and stepped back. I signed receipt with the chain still tight. Elevator doors opened and uniforms filled the hallway. Body cams live, evidence boxes ready, clear purpose. They photographed every surface near the ceiling mount. Then they sealed the camera in their own bag. Good eyes, one murmured, already writing. Where is he now? An officer asked the attendant. On-site pickup window at noon, she replied, checking notes. We will monitor that transfer, the detective answered. He looked at me with a steady, human pause. You doing okay? A breath left me like steam. I'm functional, I answered, which was the truth. He nodded once and marked the time on his sheet. Expect a forensic report within 2 days, he added. Do not interact if he reaches out. I raised my phone and showed the earlier plea. They logged the number and asked for my carrier. I approved the release with a firm signature. Process gives you rails when the ground shifts. They left a victim advocate card on the table. I set it next to the order like armor. Noon crept closer, Lee. Key a metronome you can't ignore. I packed essentials in a backpack with quick hands. Nothing sentimental, only what keeps me moving. I looped the bag by the door for later. I planned routes and backups because redundancy saves days. A message pinged from the manager's account. Pickup will occur under staff watch in police presence. I answered with a single word, confirmed. Then I stood in the kitchen and rolled my shoulders. I rehearsed saying nothing while everything happened. At noon sharp, keys scratched at the outer handle. The escort announced themselves and entered as a group. Quinn hovered behind them with a duffel and tense jaw. His eyes flicked to the ceiling, then away fast. He spotted the empty bracket and whitened around the mouth. Collect what's on your checklist, the manager instructed, clipped. Electronics stay until cleared, the detective added, colder. Quinn nodded without looking at me at all. He moved through the space like it might bite. Every drawer he opened was watched by 3 pairs. From his jacket, a folded sheet dropped to the floor. A second list, brands, model numbers, serial IDs. I snapped a photo before the officer picked it up. He glanced at Quinn and raised one eyebrow. Planning inventory for resale, he asked, almost bored. Quinn's response was a shake of the head. Then he reached for a sweater and paused. Something small rattled on the shelf behind it. Another micro unit wedged near the bracket. The officer grunted and called it in. I felt heat rise and forced my jaw to unclench. This wasn't clumsy curiosity, this was constructed intrusion. The detective logged the duplicate with a new seal. Pattern established, he noted, more to himself. My hand steadied because truth now had layers. Quinn zipped his bag with frantic jerks. Last pass, the manager announced, checking the list. He lingered by my doorframe and traced the grain. A habit, a tell, a goodbye without words. An officer stepped between us until he retreated. They walked him to the elevator and waited. The doors closed and the hall fell quiet. I exhaled for the first time in an hour. Then my phone lit with a fresh email alert. Subject line read account activity from unknown location. I opened it and skimmed fast for threat. Failed logins, multiple attempts, location 2 cities away. I forwarded to the detective and my provider. Then I rotated credentials and revoked every session. When I finished, the screen finally stopped blinking. The advocate called right after with clear steps. Change routines, share a safety plan with 2 friends. I repeated the plan back until it felt muscle deep. We scheduled a check-in for tomorrow morning. I wrote it on a sticky note and breathed again. I walked to the new lock and tested it twice. Solid turn, clean catch, no extra play. I set my backpack by the door and tightened straps. I wasn't fleeing, I was choosing. There's a difference you feel in your bones. I stood in the middle of the room and listened. No whir, no click, no tiny buzz. Silence returned like a room regaining its outline. I let it sit for a full minute. Then I dialed a moving company and booked the earliest slot. The fire alarm shrieked mid-bite. I grabbed my pack and bolted. Doors opened up and down the hall. I checked the peephole once anyway and saw nothing. I pocketed both phones and locked the new deadbolt. Then I joined the flow toward the stairs, alert and tight. On the exit landing, a figure leaned against the railing. Cap pulled low, duffel slung, familiar posture that punched memory. He lifted his head just enough for me to recognize him. No contact, order be damned, he was here. I slid behind two neighbors and kept moving fast. Outside, people collected in clumps while sprinklers hissed somewhere. I scanned the crowd and spotted him across the curb. He had a second phone now, smaller and taped. Our eyes met for one hard second that tasted metallic. I raised my camera and started recording without a word. He turned his back and tried to melt into traffic. I followed at a safe distance with the lens steady. "Stop right there," a patrol called, crossing diagonally. Quinn froze and lifted his hands in a slow arc. The officer approached while I kept the red dot rolling. "Temporary order shows within 500 feet, the patrol announced. Quinn's jaw worked and something ugly twitched in his cheek. He tried to speak and then glanced at me. The officer stepped into that gaze and blocked it. Another unit arrived with quiet tires and quicker hands. They patted him down and produced another micro device. Not a toy, not innocent, battery warm from use. One officer looked at me and nodded once. "We'll need your statement appended to the report." I breathed through the rush and saved the clip twice. The building cleared us to re-enter after the system reset. I walked back in with a guard at my shoulder. In my room, a faint wet mark dotted the ceiling. Sprinkler discharge had touched the old bracket spot. I filmed it briefly and then started packing faster. The detective called before I filled the first box. "Forensics pulled network logs from the recovered unit," he began. "Transmissions tied to a personal hotspot registered to him. We also traced an attempted link to a resale forum." My throat tightened and then steadied into iron. "Does that change charges?" I asked, bracing anyway. "It adds attempted distribution and stalking," he confirmed. "We will move on a full protective order today." I thanked him and stared at the wall until focus returned. A decision landed hard and clean behind my ribs. I called the moving crew and pushed the pickup earlier. They could make it in 2 hours with a small team. I texted 2 friends the safety plan and the timeline. Then I forwarded everything to a new email I created. Redundancy kept panic from slipping through cracks. A knock, measured and official, broke the rhythm again. The property manager stood with a clipboard and a key ring. "Arrest was executed," she reported, eyes direct and steady. "We will swap your cylinder again and add a bar." I stepped aside and let maintenance work without chatter. While they drilled, my phone pulsed with a voicemail. A woman's voice trembled and tried to sound kind. "I'm his sister, he's sick, please reconsider." I replayed it once and then saved it to a folder. Compassion ached, but boundaries held like steel. The movers texted an arrival time and requested access. I reserved the elevator and mapped the path to the truck. No detours, no linger, smooth exit in one push. I labeled 3 boxes with short codes and sharp arrows. Every stroke felt like reclaiming square footage in my head. The detective reappeared with an officer and fresh paperwork. "Emergency hearing at 3 for the permanent order," he said. "You should attend if you can," he added, meeting my eyes. "I'll be there," I answered, knuckles pressed to the frame. He left me copies and wished me a quiet hour. The crew rolled in with tape and crisp focus. They loaded fast while I tracked items on my list. I kept one bag strapped across my chest throughout. Paranoia had turned into protocol, which felt like growth. We cleared the unit in 40 minutes without a scratch. On the sidewalk, a rideshare nosed up to the curb. The driver checked my name and reached for the hatch. I watched the building one last time without blinking. Then my phone chimed with a new mail header. Subject: read account recovery request rejected due to lock. Good, the last door he tried wouldn't open now. I climbed in and pulled the seatbelt across my chest. "Courthouse, please," I told the driver with a steady voice. He nodded and merged into the stream without questions. The city moved, and I moved with it on purpose. At the courthouse steps, I met the advocate from before. She handed me a numbered ticket and a calming nod. Inside, the clerk called our case before my pulse slowed. I took the front row and kept both phones on silent. Across the aisle, a defense attorney shuffled a thin file. Quinn entered in cuffs and looked smaller than memory. He glanced once in my direction and then away fast. The judge read the petition and the police summary. Then the hallway footage appeared on a monitor without sound. I watched my own door on repeat and refused to look down. "Do you have anything to add?" the judge asked me. I stood and kept words spare and exact. I described the alarm, the sidewalk violation, the devices. I ended on the voicemail and the failed recovery attempt. Then I sat before emotion could blur the edges. "Order granted," the judge declared, gavel quiet but final. Distance increased, contact prohibited, devices surrendered for review. A hearing date set that would outlast temporary fixes. I exhaled once and felt my shoulders finally drop. The advocate squeezed my hand and pointed toward the exit. Outside, the afternoon carried weight but not fog. My movers were already en route to the new place. I texted the manager the updated address for forms. Then my screen lit again with a last surprise. A hidden email appeared from a dummy account titled Apology. I opened it standing on the courthouse steps with traffic humming. One sentence sat alone like a dare. "I only looked because you were scared." I stared until the letters lost shape and meaning. Then I forwarded it to evidence and pressed delete. The key turned clean. I stepped in and set the bag down. My phone vibrated before the door even latched. Another recovery attempt blocked by my new settings. I screenshotted the alert and pushed it to the case file. The room felt steady, but my nerves stayed up. I slid a bar under the handle and tested the latch. Windows checked, balcony checked, routine tight and quick. No rituals for comfort, only steps that change outcomes. I walked the perimeter once more and timed my return. Small drills make bigger moments feel manageable. An engine idled beneath the window longer than traffic should. I filmed the street and zoomed on the license plate. Non-emergency line logged the sighting without fuss. "Patrol will sweep the block," the dispatcher assured. I kept the camera rolling until the car peeled off. A new email arrived with an attachment labeled Apology 2. I didn't touch it. I forwarded and flagged for malware. Within minutes, the investigator replied with a short plan. "Do not open, we will subpoena the headers." I watched the spinning icon and felt anger settle. Knuckles rapped twice. My friend stood in the hall. She handed over a spare key and a passphrase. We practiced a check-in script like a scene. Her eyes stayed firm while we ran the drill. Habit would keep me ahead when fear tried to stall. Night pressed without drama until a soft scrape above me. I checked the peephole and saw building staff on a ladder. They inspected detectors as part of the new sweep. Clipboards, gloves, clear protocol, and no surprises. I logged the time anyway because patterns matter. Morning delivered a call from the prosecutor's office. Charges expanded after the sidewalk violation and the hardware. Discovery would include network traces and the inventory sheet. "Prepare a statement for sentencing," the assistant requested. I agreed, already shaping words that cut and heal. We met at the old unit for the last walkthrough. The manager opened with a temporary code and kept quiet. I scanned high and low and then paused under a shelf. A sticker hit a tiny tag with a burned-in address. The tech tweezed it off and bagged it with a sigh. That find closed the loop in a way nothing else had. Not clumsy, intentional, layered, and methodical. I signed the final form and handed over my fob. The door closed behind us like a page turning hard. I didn't look back because forward finally had shape. Back at the new place, I wrote my impact statement. Short sentences, no padding, no explanations for his choices. I described the nights in numbers and verifiable facts. Then I ended with one line about boundary and breath. I attached it and hit send without hovering. A blocked number tried twice and rolled to voicemail. I let it sit and opened a music app instead. Control sometimes means refusing to answer bait. I cleaned the countertop in slow, practical circles. Silence returned and stayed long enough to feel earned. The mover texted that the last box would arrive tomorrow. I replied with a window and a code word. Then I propped a chair under the knob out of habit. Not out of terror, out of discipline that works. I turned the lights off and stood in the dark. Air moved through my lungs like a metronome I set. No strange hum, no camera glare, no footsteps outside. I lay down with both phones on the dresser. Screen down, do not disturb, backups verified. I closed my eyes and kept one promise: I would sleep, ready.